A mysterious woman, whose true nature remains a secret, possesses the power to seduce and captivate those she desires, stirring intrigue and outrage as mysterious disappearances and deaths occur. What will her next move be? Amali walked alongside Nia through the bustling market, holding a straw basket already half filled with fruits and vegetables. The atmosphere was lively, with the voices of sellers and buyers filling the air, and the smell of spices and fresh fish lingering around. Nia seemed to observe everything with curiosity, her eyes attentive to every stall and person around her. Amali, for her part, was speaking to a vendor, selecting some tubers to take home. Suddenly, a woman stopped near them, crossing her arms and looking directly at Nia with an expression of pure disdain. Her posture was rigid, and the tone of her voice cut through the hum of the marketplace. "That woman shouldn't be here," she exclaimed, pointing accusingly at Nia. Amali turned, surprised by the hostility. "Sithim Biso," she said, recognizing the woman. "What's happening? Why are you acting like this?" Sithim Biso, a resident from one of the more distant parts of the village, was known for being very outspoken and sometimes impulsive. Her anger was evident, and she didn't try to hide her emotions in front of everyone. "That woman," Sithim Biso shouted, pointing at Nia again. "Since she appeared, strange things have started happening in this village. Don't you see it, Amali? She's a witch. She uses black magic to enchant the men." The whispers began around them. Some people stopped what they were doing to watch the scene, while others stepped back, uncomfortable. Amali, however, wasn't intimidated. "Sithim Biso, you're being unfair," Amali said, trying to remain calm. "Nia is just a woman who lost her memory. She hasn't done anything wrong." "You're blind, Amali," Sithim Biso continued, ignoring the plea. "She doesn't speak. She appeared out of nowhere, and the way she looks at the men, it's as if she hypnotizes them. That's witchcraft." Nia remained silent, motionless, her eyes fixed on Sithim Biso. She showed no fear or anger, just an unsettling calm that seemed to intensify the other woman's irritation. "Sithim Biso, this is ridiculous," Amali insisted, now more firmly. "There's no proof of anything you're saying. She's under my care, and I took her to the doctor myself. We're trying to understand what happened to her. Please stop with these accusations." "Then do what you want, Amali," Sithim Biso replied, irritated. "But don't say I didn't warn you. That woman will bring disgrace to all of us. She should leave before something worse happens." Amali, realizing the situation wasn't going to resolve itself there, took Nia's arm and guided her away from the marketplace. The whispers and curious stares continued as they left. Back at the house, Amali was visibly shaken. She sat down, rubbing her temples, while Nia remained silent, as always. "I'm sorry, Nia," Amali said after a moment. "I don't know why Sithim Biso is being so cruel. Don't pay attention to her, all right? Let's wait for the doctor's results. I'm sure that will help us." Nia, as usual, didn't reply but sat close to Amali, observing her with a calm gaze. Night approached, and once again, mysteries hung over the two women as the village began to question Nia's presence even more. Amal was near the window, looking outside while absent-mindedly stirring a bowl of grain she needed to clean. Nia was beside her, folding a cloth that Amal had left on the table. The night was peaceful, but the tension in the air was palpable, even inside the house. "Nia," Amali began, sighing and looking at her. "People have been very agitated these past few days. It's not just about you, though I know some whispers have put you at the center of certain conversations." Nia raised her eyes attentively, showing that she was listening, but she made no other movement. "First, there was that terrible storm," Amali continued, pouring the grains into a jar. "It lasted for so many days. People couldn't leave their homes, and many lost their crops. Some even said it was a punishment from the heavens." Nia tilted her head slightly, as if reflecting on the words. "And then, when we thought everything was calming down, there was that tremor," Amali said, now in a more serious tone. She turned to Nia, as if she needed to share the weight of it. "I've never felt anything like that before. The earth shook under my feet, as if it were alive and furious. It was terrifying, Nia. Everyone was terrified." Nia kept her calm gaze, but her expression darkened slightly at the mention of the tremor. "Afterwards, they said it was caused by a seaquake," Amali explained, running her hand through her hair, clearly worried. Luckily, the epicenter was far from the island, so we weren't hit directly. But the villagers are afraid this is only the beginning. Many people are saying something worse could happen. She stood up, placing the jar of grains on the shelf, and then turned to Naya. I don't believe in those superstitions, but I understand their fear. The crops are weakened, the fishing boats are damaged, and now there's this feeling that the very ground beneath our feet isn't safe. Nya remained silent, but her eyes seemed to carry something deeper, a weight that Amale couldn't comprehend. Amale sighed again and stepped closer, placing a hand on Nia's shoulder. I just hope all of this passes soon, she said in a tired tone. Life here is already hard enough. We don't need more tragedies or fears to make things worse. Nia, as always, responded only with a deep gaze and a subtle smile. Amale tried to interpret it as a gesture of comfort, but deep down, something still left her uneasy. They continued their task that night, the distant sound of the sea filling the silence, while the island and its inhabitants waited for what the future had in store for them. Amale was in the living room, her bare feet touching the wooden floor, as the static sound of the radio filled the space before the announcer resumed the broadcast. Outside, the wind still blew restlessly, carrying the sea's humidity to her house's windows. She looked toward the hallway, where Naya's room was located. The woman had retired earlier, silent as always, leaving Amale alone with her thoughts. While turning the radio antenna to improve the signal, Amale reflected on the past few days. People are so tense lately, she murmured to herself, and I can't blame them. The sound of the radio suddenly caught her attention. The announcer's voice returned to the air, and Amale adjusted the volume to listen more clearly. In a recent statement, local authorities confirmed that fishermen found, earlier this morning, the bodies of 2 men on the northern coast of the island. One of the men was a local resident, while the other was identified as a foreign tourist. Both, according to preliminary reports, died by drowning. Amale frowned, shaking her head slightly in sorrow. It was always sad to hear about deaths at sea, but something in the announcer's tone made her keep listening. However, the announcer continued, the medical team that examined the bodies found unusual marks. Both corpses showed puncture wounds on the neck and signs of significant blood loss. Specialists believe the injuries may have been caused by some type of sea creature, though they are still uncertain about what it could be. Investigations are ongoing. Amale felt a chill run up her spine. Puncture wounds on the neck? Significant blood loss? She tried to push the thought away, telling herself it was probably a shark or another aggressive sea animal. Even so, the announcer's words echoed in her mind. She turned off the radio, feeling the silence in the house grow even heavier. It was late, and the village was shrouded in a tranquil gloom, with only a few lights flickering here and there from lanterns in the shacks and along the dirt streets. But Naya wasn't home. Naya seemed increasingly fascinated by the village's nighttime world, a universe of its own, where the rules of the day gave way to other rhythms and intentions. The small streets were populated by whispers and furtive encounters, and Naya, with her mysterious presence, soon became a notable figure. The men's interest in her was no longer a secret. Naya attracted glances wherever she went, but it wasn't just her beauty that drew attention. It was something deeper, something that made the men feel compelled to follow her, to lose themselves in her company. She didn't speak, but it seemed like she didn't need to. A glance, a gesture, or a light touch was enough to establish a connection that no one could explain. When Nya decided to approach someone, she did so without hurry, but with a silent determination. She chose, and those chosen couldn't resist. For them, it was as if she was in control of everything, even without saying a word. The nights went on like this. Nya was seen entering and exiting discreet bars, walking the streets with different companions, disappearing to isolated places. Some men spoke of her with fascination, describing their time with her as moments they couldn't forget, but also couldn't describe clearly. Others simply avoided the topic, as if something about the encounters with Naya disturbed or left them speechless. Sithembiso was in her room, standing before an old mirror. The orange light of the late afternoon filtered through the cracks in the window, bathing her room with a soft glow. It was a moment she looked forward to every day, the walk to the creek. She picked up a small metal basin where she would carry her soap and towel. This habit of bathing in the creek at dusk had been part of her routine for years. The cool water running between the stones seemed to wash away not only the dust of the day, but also the worries that weighed on her mind. However, in recent days, Sithembiso felt that this peaceful moment was harder to reach. The restless conversations in the village about disappearances and unusual events wouldn't leave her head. And of course, there was Nia. Even without proof, something about that woman gave her chills. It was a presence she couldn't ignore, a sense of danger that seemed to grow stronger every day. But as she adjusted her clothes and grabbed the basin, Sithembiso tried to push these thoughts away. "I need this bath," she murmured to herself, as if speaking to an invisible friend. "I need to clear my mind." She opened the door to her house and stepped outside. The cool evening breeze touched her face, and she took a deep breath, letting the breeze calm her nerves. The path to the creek wasn't very long, but it passed through a small trail surrounded by tall trees and bushes. Sithembiso tried to focus on the rhythm of her steps and the tranquil sounds of nature around her. For a moment, she thought about how the creek was one of the few places where she truly felt free, away from the judgmental eyes of the village and the rumors that seemed to grow every day. As she neared the water, she made a conscious effort not to think about Naya, the disappearances, or what the future might bring. After all, in that moment, it was just her and the creek. At least that's what she hoped for. At the creek, Sithembiso bathed, with her eyes closed, letting the cold water envelop her body. The gentle current passed around her, while small whirlpools formed, carrying fallen leaves from the trees. She took a deep breath, feeling the coolness of the evening fill her lungs, and then slowly exhaled, as if she could breathe out all the thoughts that weighed on her mind. There, surrounded only by the sound of the flowing water and the distant song of some birds, Sithembiso felt that her worries had been left behind in the village. There were no rumors, no judgmental glances, no mysteries disturbing her. It was just her and nature, in harmony, dissolving any unrest. The sensation of the cool water on her skin brought almost immediate relief, and for a moment, she felt grateful for that refuge. Sithembiso submerged herself completely, disappearing for a few seconds. The water was clear. When she emerged again, she let out a soft sigh of satisfaction, running her hands over her wet arms. "Ah," she murmured to herself, looking at the rounded stones at the bottom of the creek. If life were always this simple and peaceful. She allowed herself to smile, something rare for her in recent times. That creek was more than a place to bathe. It was a sanctuary, a space that seemed to be entirely hers, where the weight of the world faded away. As she rubbed her arms, fully immersed in her moment of peace, a small sound echoed through the woods. It was so subtle that she almost didn't notice, just a slight rustling between the leaves. Sithembiso raised her eyes for a moment, but saw nothing but the tall trees surrounding the creek. She shrugged, believing it could be some small animal or the wind playing with the branches. After all, nothing could break that serenity. At least that's what she believed in that moment. Sithembiso ran her hands over her wet face, letting the water drip slowly as she closed her eyes for a moment, still lost in her tranquility. But something made her stop, a soft sound of footsteps on the vegetation near the creek. She froze for a second, her ears alert. Sithembiso noticed a silhouette on the bank, among the shadows of the trees. It was Nia. Sithembiso jolted, her body stiff in the water. Nia was there, standing still, watching her with an expression impossible to decipher. The wind made the fabric of Nia's dress flutter slightly, but her face remained motionless, cold as stone. "What are you doing here?" Sithembiso asked, trying to control the surprise in her voice. Nia didn't answer. She simply took a step forward, her bare feet gently touching the stones on the shore. Her silence was unsettling. "Go away!" Sithembiso shouted, her voice choked with irritation and something deeper, something that was starting to feel like fear. "I don't like you, Nia. You scare me." Nia remained motionless, her eyes fixed on Sithembiso, never wavering for an instant. It was as if she hadn't even heard the words. Nia's gaze seemed darker in the dim light, deep and empty at the same time. "I said go away," Sithembiso repeated, now taking a step back in the water, as if trying to put some distance between them. But Naya ignored the request. She moved forward slowly, descending to the edge of the creek, her expression still cold and impassive. Sithembiso felt her heart race, pounding fiercely in her chest. A wave of dread surged up her spine, and she began to tremble uncontrollably. "What? What do you want?" Sithembiso murmured, her voice nearly failing her. It was then that Nia began to move even closer. Her movements were deliberate, almost graceful, like a predator finally reaching its prey. Her feet entered the water without a sound, and Sithembiso was paralyzed. She couldn't move, even though every instinct in her screamed to run. Nia stopped just a few steps away. Then slowly she tilted her head and opened her mouth. Sithembiso's eyes widened in shock, panic taking over every inch of her body. Nia's teeth were long and sharp, fangs gleaming in the dim light of the evening. They weren't human teeth. They were the teeth of something different, something monstrous. "No, no," Sithembiso stammered, awkwardly retreating in the water, which now seemed to trap her, as if the creek were complicit in what was happening. Nia took another step forward, her eyes fixed on her, cold as death. Sithembiso tried to scream, but the sound that came out was choked by the terror tightening her throat. It was too late. The water churned violently as Nia moved, fast as a shadow, and Sithembiso's scream vanished in the same instant. The creek fell silent again afterward, as if nothing had happened. Only a few ripples spread across the surface of the water, and the calm sound of the current continued, like a song that ignored what had just occurred. Nia emerged shortly after, alone, with the same cold and impenetrable expression. She stayed there for a few seconds in the water, motionless, before slowly pulling away, returning to the shore. Naya disappeared between the trees. Amali and Thandeka stood on the beach, watching the waves ebb and flow with a hypnotic calm. Amali, her expression clouded with worry, brushed a strand of hair the wind kept tossing into her face and remarked, "Nia decided to stay home today. She seemed, I don't know, kind of off, not her usual self." Thandeka tilted her head, frowning with curiosity. "Off? I wonder what could be going on with her." Amali sighed, her gaze fixed on the horizon. "I have no idea. It's not like she'd tell me, you know. Maybe it's just a passing illness." Thandeka nodded, though her eyes betrayed a flicker of concern she chose not to voice. After some time talking about other topics, they parted ways, and Amali returned home, expecting to find Nia resting. However, when she arrived, the house was silent and empty. Amali called out Nia's name, but there was no response. She checked the few rooms, but Nia was nowhere to be found. Amali stopped in the middle of the living room, looking around with a mix of concern and resignation. Maybe she's feeling better and decided to go for a walk as usual, she thought, trying to convince herself. She'll probably be back soon. Despite her reassurances, a subtle unease began to build in her chest, like a ripple growing into a wave. But Amali pushed those thoughts aside, sitting down to wait for Nia's return. Nia walked slowly through the forest, her steps light yet purposeful, as if she knew exactly where she was headed. The dense vegetation seemed to part for her, and the sunlight barely pierced through the canopy of trees. After a while, she reached her destination, a cave hidden by moss-covered rocks and tangled roots. Without hesitation, Nia entered the dark, damp space as though it had been her dwelling for a long time. Inside the cave, something extraordinary was unfolding. Nia placed her hands on her abdomen, which appeared slightly swollen. Her expression was serene, almost radiant. Meanwhile, back at home, Amali paced back and forth, worry etched across her face. Morning had come, and Nia had still not returned. Amali stared out the window, hoping to see the woman's familiar figure appear on the horizon, but the path remained empty. Where could she be? Amali whispered to herself, her chest tightening. Unable to wait any longer, she decided to search for Nia. Amali scoured the beaches, the trails, and even the stream where they used to fish together, but there was no sign of her. By the end of the day, she returned home, exhausted and more anxious than ever. A day passed, and Amali still found no trace of Nia. Questions swirled endlessly in her mind. Could something have happened to her? Did she leave without telling me? As Amale wrestled with her growing unease, there in the center of the rocky space lay the result of what seemed to be a peculiar pregnancy. An egg, large and luminous, emitted a soft golden glow that reflected off the cave walls. Nia approached it carefully, running her fingers over its smooth, warm surface, as though she were contemplating something precious and unique. The glowing egg seemed to pulse faintly, as if it had a life of its own. Nia sat beside it, watching every detail of its surface while murmuring something incomprehensible, a sound that resembled an ancient melody, deep and shrouded in mystery. The egg's light illuminated her face as she waited patiently for something only she seemed to understand. More than 24 hours had passed since Naya's disappearance, and Amale's restlessness only deepened. As twilight fell, she stared at the trail with a mix of hope and resignation, trying to accept the idea that Naya might have left for good. That evening, Amale sat in her home, the weight of uncertainty heavy in the air. She sighed deeply, attempting to distract herself with small tasks, though her mind remained fixated on Nia's absence. Suddenly, the sound of footsteps outside interrupted her thoughts. They were light but steady, drawing closer and closer. Amale froze, her heart racing, until she heard the familiar creak of the door opening. "Nia!" Amale exclaimed in disbelief, rushing toward the entrance. There stood Naya, motionless in the doorway, her usual expression unchanged, as though nothing had happened. Amale couldn't contain her surprise and relief, gripping Naya's hands tightly. "Where were you? What happened? Why didn't you come back sooner?" Amale asked, her words tumbling out in a near-desperate attempt to make sense of the days Naya had been missing. Naya remained silent for a moment, as if gathering her thoughts. Through calm gestures and facial expressions, she conveyed that she had become lost in the dense forest. With simple movements, she showed how she had wandered, disoriented, until she finally found her way back. Amale's eyes widened in shock. "Lost in the forest all this time? Nya, that's awful. You must have gone through so much." Though still puzzled and uneasy about the explanation, Amale couldn't hide her happiness at seeing Nia return. She touched Nia's shoulder with a warm smile, her eyes shining with relief. "What matters is that you're here now, and nothing worse happened." Nia responded with a faint smile, a gesture that reassured Amale that, despite everything, Nia was all right. Amale closed the door, offering her food and something warm to wear, while silently wondering if she truly understood everything about Naya's mysterious absence. Several days had passed since Naya's disappearance and return, but the doubts and suspicions surrounding her continued to grow in the village. While walking through the market, Thandeka spotted a small group of villagers engaged in a heated conversation. Curious, she approached. "I swear I saw that woman near the place where Sithembiso's body was found," said a man, frowning deeply. "It was the same day. And I saw her the night those two fishermen disappeared," added a woman. "Coincidence? I don't think so." An older man, serious and stern, crossed his arms and remarked, "Ever since she showed up, things have only gotten worse. She brought something bad with her." "So what are we waiting for?" interjected a young man impatiently. "Let's gather everyone we can and put an end to this. We need to capture her before someone else disappears." Thandeka listened silently, her heart pounding. She knew things could spiral out of control quickly, and that, in their outrage, the villagers might resort to extreme measures. Without wasting any time, she turned and hurried to Amale's house. Amale was at home, organizing some baskets when Thandeka burst in, nearly out of breath. "Amale, something terrible might happen," Thandeka said, her eyes wide and her words tumbling out quickly. Amale stopped what she was doing and walked toward her friend, concern etched across her face. "What happened?" Thandeka grasped Amale's hands, trying to steady herself to explain. "A group of villagers is gathering right now and they're heading this way. They're convinced that Nia has something to do with the disappearances and all the bad things happening in the village. They want to capture her, or worse." Amale felt a chill run down her spine. "Nia, she just left. She went to the beach." Thandeka looked at Amale with urgency. "We have to do something. They're angry. They won't stop until they find her." Imali nodded quickly, grabbed a small bag of water and a cloth, and ran out, leaving Thandeka behind. She knew she had to find Naya before the villagers did. As she ran along the trails that led to the beach, Imali tried to organize her thoughts. Despite the strange things about Nie, she didn't believe the mysterious woman could be responsible for all of this. Imali reached the beach, her heart racing, her feet sinking quickly into the soft sand as she ran toward the sound of the waves. Her eyes scanned the coastline until she finally spotted Nia. She was standing close to the water, staring at the horizon as if hypnotized. "Naya!" Imali shouted, her voice full of urgency and concern. Naya didn't react. Her back remained turned to Imali, and instead of stopping, she began walking into the sea, her steps steady but strangely fluid, as if the water posed no obstacle. "Nya, wait!" Imali shouted again, running toward her. But Naya didn't look back, nor did she make any gesture to indicate she had heard. In a matter of seconds, the water had reached Naya's waist, and without hesitation, she plunged fully into the sea. Imali stopped abruptly, her feet now at the edge of the waves, her breath heavy. Her eyes fixed on the spot where Naya had disappeared. The waves broke gently, as if nothing out of the ordinary had happened. "Nya!" Imali shouted once more, her voice echoing through the emptiness of the beach. No response came. Imali waited, her eyes wide and fixed on the water, hoping Naya would surface at any moment. But time passed and the surface remained calm, as if Naya had never been there. A feeling of emptiness and unease overtook Imali. Naya had disappeared as mysteriously as she had appeared, leaving only doubts, memories, and a deep silence in the air. Thus another mystery was born on the island.